Welcome to Mindset Talk with me, your host, Jabu Zwane. I'm so excited today. With me today is a man that is very dear to my heart. A lot of who I am today, I can credit to my relationship with him. And I thought that in starting off these Mindset Talks and relationships, there is no better candidate than himself to come and talk to us today about some questions which are probably burning in many people's minds based on my social media activity. His name is Pastor Renaldo Brown. Welcome, Pastor Renaldo.
Hi.
Now, Pastor Renaldo Brown, I've known him since 2000, and he has been involved very intimately in my life in various aspects, spiritually, as a friend, as a brother, as a counselor in many different respects, but specifically as well, as far as my relationships are concerned, he's been there from the time that I was a single man, guiding me through the whole process of getting ready and be prepared for marriage, and ensuring and questioning, or rather giving me guidance and counsel as I was getting ready in that whole process. And so today we're going to be asking him quite a few other questions. He himself is married to Charity Brown, and together they've been blessed with one daughter, Linda Brown. And he has more than 25 years experience as a missionary overseas, the majority of which he spent in Africa, including South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Uganda. And he has, as a result, counseled couples on different continents, on different countries, of different nationalities, of different ethnic backgrounds, of different cultures. And I'm so excited to have him today because I really think that without a doubt, he will share with us many insights and wisdoms that can help some of you perhaps that are looking for a partner, and some of you perhaps that are married and wondering how do we continue to make this work during this time of COVID-19. So without wasting too much time, I'm going to go shoot straight into the interview and interrogate him. No.
Strong verb.
just ask him a few questions. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Pastor Renaldo, for agreeing to be a part of this podcast. I really appreciate it. I do know that you are a very busy man, and I really appreciate you've made time to talk to us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Okay. Now, the first question that I have, a question that is, that probably people have on their minds today is, how long have you been actively counseling married couples? And I may ask also, how vast has been your counseling in terms of some of the things I've mentioned, like nationalities, ethnicities, and different cultures?
I would say my marriage counseling experience is more than 20 years, closer to 25 years. I would say roughly 75% of that counseling is confined to the African continent, between roughly 14 to 15 countries. I'd say another 20% is the United States of America, counseling here in various states. I'm going to say possibly 6 different states. I can remember 6 clearly, but it could be more. I just remember 6. And then I would say the 5% of my counseling has been other, meaning Europe, with couples that are in Europe as opposed to Africa and also America. So that's about how long I've been counseling. That's about the variety of my counsel. I've had the privilege to reveal God's mind concerning relationships on a variety of continents and a variety of countries. It's a part of my ministry. It's not all of my ministry, but because I'm a pastor, as many pastors do, we counsel a lot of marriages. We counsel a lot of relationships, to be honest.
Yes, and you're currently serving on the Greater Grace World Outreach Church in Baltimore, right? As part of the counseling team?
Yes. Yeah. I'm part of the counseling team there. I also do a lot of, I have clients that I deal with that are outside the church,
right.
Referrals to me. I have a personal private counseling that I do for people that are referred to me, or I do other relationships, other connections. Peers in my profession. Other pastors sometimes recommend people to me. So like today, for instance, I was dealing with a couple today from a Baptist church that was referred to me. So that also happens.
Excellent, excellent. Now, the first question that I would ask you is this, as far as in preparation for marriage, how important would you say premarital counseling is? Can you be able to give us some pointers and why it is necessary, if so?
Well, I believe that what tends to happen with marriage is that we kind of self-counsel. We counsel ourselves because we're choosing for ourselves. Like no one goes to the grocery store and shops for me. I go to the store and I choose what I want, and then I go to the register and pay. No one critiques what you buy from the store. We tend to look at marriage like any other major decision. We believe we are the best mind for what we're doing. Though we've never done it in our entire life, somehow we figure if we trust our intuition, we trust our leading, we trust our life, we trust counsel from friends, and we feel we can make a great decision. Usually people come to me at the end of the process. Most couples go to the pastor and say, we want to get married now, so counsel us. I think that's a little late in the game. I think to suddenly come to your pastor and say, okay, now I want to get married, that's like coming to your pastor and saying, well, I'm moving to Las Vegas. I've already bought a ticket. I've already sold my house. I've already sold my car. What do you think? I mean, you're not asking for counsel. You're asking for permission. And sadly, as big as that decision is, we don't want to give you permission. The pastor's not in your life to give you permission. You don't need our permission. You need our counsel. The gift to the church in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11 is the pastor. Utilizing that gift at the end doesn't help you. Premarital counseling is vital for the following reasons. Number one, I would say objective viewpoint. I don't care who you are. When it comes to relationships, none of us are objective. When your heart is engaged, it's hard to be objective. It's impossible to be objective. So if you're saying, no, we don't need any counsel, we can figure it out ourselves, you're delusional. None of us are objective. You need a third voice.
Yes.
Because the third voice can give you an objective viewpoint. They have no dog in the fight. They have no emotional connection. They can be completely dispassionate. They can sit there and say, okay, they can call things the way they are. They can say this is this and that is that. They can ask questions that you wouldn't think to ask. I always come in with some very hard questions because I know you're so busy in love, you're not in life. And there's the event, which is the wedding, and there is the marriage, which is the life. And you're so busy talking about the event, you don't think about the life. You're so busy talking about the love, but love is not enough. And I'm practically going to live with someone the rest of my life. I'm practically going to invite someone into my life closer than my mother. Your spouse knows things about you that your mother will never know. So if you're letting somebody into your holy of holies this deep, you need an objective viewpoint, because sometimes you can't look out for yourself. You say, I know what's good for me. Yeah, but that gets clouded by physical attraction and subjectivity and emotional content. All that clouds the water. You're not clear-headed. Many times, it bears to reason. The number one city in America that does the most weddings every year is Las Vegas. And the reason why they do the most weddings is because two people are making crazy decisions. It's a subjective decision. And as many as they do the most weddings, they also have the most divorces for the same reason. They made a subjective decision without objectivity. So that's the first thing. Number two, I think you need someone to help you have practical relational exploration. Someone that sits with you and says, okay, let's explore this a little bit. How long have you known this person? There's a difference in your ages. Do you want children? When do you want children? Practical relational exploration. What's important to you in a relationship? What's not important to you in a relationship? Practical exploration. Are you mature enough to handle a marriage? It can't be I want it because I want it. You don't give a gun or a driver's license to a 4-year-old because they want it. are you mature enough for a relationship? So that's the second reason, practical relational exploration. Number three, I would say what you're getting ready to step into is a life. So you need to put some structure in, a foundation in. Put a structure, help a couple to structure their life so they're walking into something that has a measure of order. Otherwise, it's just confusion. It can't be love and two hugs. There's got to be some structure. Like, okay, we're going to live here. We're going to do this. We're going to make this. Make some solid decisions so that there's some structure to walk into. You can't figure it out as you go along. This is one of your top 4 most important decisions of your life. You can't wing it. You can't wing it because this is life-changing. You don't wing life-changing. You can say, well, I'll figure out what City Hall is downtown. You can wing that. You can wing it when it comes to things like sports or directions. But when it comes to life-changing decisions, like do I want to be a parent? Do I want to be married? Those, you can't just fly by the seat of your pants. You need help to build structure. Sadly, folks are more objectively counseled about their money than they are about their relationship, particularly marriage. They're too cavalier. They don't see it for what it is. Another reason for premarital counseling, because there's a measure of marital instruction. Many times you've never been married before. There's instruction involved to what it means to be married. A lot of times in the village in Africa, other married people give you some instruction. Every bit of marital counseling has instruction into it. Sadly, in the village, or sadly in African culture, the training comes in at the last minute. It's like, okay, I'm going to get married, so a week or 2 weeks before I get married, they culturally teach you how to cook. They culturally teach you even sex habits. All that's taught in a round-robin, quick, rush thing. But there's so many things that are not discovered and not discussed. It's more than just passing culture. There has to be a measure of marital instruction. Because Joshua chapter 3, verses 4 and 5, you have not passed this way before. There are no professional husbands. There are no professional wives. So this, you don't walk into this thing knowing what you're doing. You need help. You need help from someone that's been trained in the area and experienced in the area. So all of your college, all of your work experience will not make you a better wife or make you a better husband. There's a measure of marital instruction. And then number 5, I think sometimes you need a wake-up call about who you really are. Are you ready to be married? Or can you handle it? A bit of self-awareness, a bit of exploration. What do you expect from yourself in this marriage? What do you expect from your spouse? Are your expectations reasonable? Maybe they're not reasonable. Maybe you want the guy on the knight on the shining horse, riding around, or you want the wife who's great in bed and raises your kids and doesn't talk and they have this view of what you think she's supposed to be. Are your expectations reasonable? One of the big problems in marriages is that people walk into a marriage with ill-conceived notions about what marriage is. And then they get disappointed because it's not what they thought they were. And maybe your expectations weren't bad, they just weren't realistic. So you're disappointed. And disappointment is a horrible foundation for any relationship. So those are my reasons why I think premarital counseling is important. I think it's too late to come to the pastor and say, okay, we want to get married now. Okay, now counsel us before we get married. So you're not asking for our counsel. You just want our permission and you want a push. I think there's 4 major stages for relationships. The first stage is dating. I liken it to a building. Because when you're getting married, you are building something. A marriage is something that's being built. And in the first stage of this building process, you're dating. Dating would be like you walk to a piece of property, you look at the piece of property, you say, could I build a house on this property? I don't know. Are there schools nearby? Is it loud here? Is it safe here? I'm not building. I'm just seeing if I could build something here. And when you're dating someone, you're investigating the territory to see if you could build something. The second stage, I would say, is courting. Courting is when you've decided, I think I can build something here. And the person that you're courting, they realize, I think I can build something here. Schools are 10 minutes away. It's a safe area. The land is pretty flat, good drainage. it's close to my job. You've now made a decision that I think I could build here, and I think they could build here, and I think I could build with them. That's courting. But you still have no tools in your hand. When you get to the place of engagement, which is the third stage, when you start to engage, at engagement, now you're actually picking up tools and you're deciding which tools are going to be efficient for building. Now you begin to think about organizing your tools. You're not building yet. At engagement, you're still organizing your tools. You're recognizing what will be effective here, what will not be effective here. You realize that there's some parts of your life that are not going to be effective in building your marriage. And there's some parts of your life that are necessary for building your marriage. So you're being very selective, but now you're organized. Now you're public. Now the world knows I'm going to be building something with this person, and come and see what we're building. And then there's the wedding. And then after the wedding, we pick up our tools and we start to build. And then there's marriage, we start building. Counseling cannot come in at the point where you're organizing your tools and you're ready to build. Counseling has got to come in. I've had men that I've counseled, even pastors, that I've counseled when they were dating. Said, okay, you're at that first stage. You're looking at that land and you're deciding whether you can build. Why not have a covering? Why would you be a Christian and date anyone uncovered? Why would you do that? You can't cover yourself. How many decisions in your life do you come to the pastor and talk about, should I get this job? Should I buy this car? Should I start this business? But you wait so late to talk about marriage. And marriage is much more important than that. So I think premarital counseling is important, because in those 4 stages, I would like counsel while I'm dating. I would like a covering while I'm courting. I would like a covering while I'm engaged. And then when we get to the marriage, we're already all together. We have trust, we have security, we have objectivity, we have connection, we have union, so that decision we come to together objectively. And love is part of it, but love is not all of it. That'll be my answer to that question.
Wow, that's a very comprehensive, very thorough. I mean, some really, really good points there, and a lot to consider. Wow. On that very same note, let me ask you this question. I mean, seeing that you've already touched on the issue of dating, would you say that it is important for someone to have something that I call a character checklist before they decide, or in terms of helping them to guide who they decide on to date? You know, you talked about the example of the property. You know, one of the things, of course, you go and look at different properties in the market, and then you sort of narrow down to which ones then are worth your time, worth inspecting. Would you think that it's important or it's necessary to have a character checklist?
I'm not sure I would call it a character checklist. I would say character is part of the checklist, because there's some things for some people that are what I would call are deal breakers. Like, you might have a woman that says, I could never marry a short man. That's her own capacity. And as a pastor, I can't force you to marry a short man, but that might be a deal breaker for you. Or I could never marry a woman who can't cook. That could be a deal breaker for you. So I think what you're saying, is it okay to have? I think we all do. I think we all have a checklist in our mind for the age that we recognize attraction to the opposite sex. There is a list in our head of wants and needs and expectations. And I think as we grow and evolve as a person, this checklist tends to change, and it's gender diverse, meaning that a woman's checklist is obviously different from a man's checklist. What a woman would want out of a man may not want out of a woman, because they have different functions. They have the same value, but different functions. But I think it's healthy, but I would also challenge that and say, I would explore my checklist, and I would challenge each expectation to see, number one, is it in line with God's mind? Am I expecting too much? Sometimes we expect things out of people that God doesn't even expect. Number one. Number two, I would check and see if these expectations, I would challenge it and say, is it reasonable? I don't want to marry a man who makes less than $1 million a year. Is that a reasonable expectation? I mean, sometimes people are single because they have unreasonable expectations. They expect too much out of people. And then number three, I would say, is the choice that I'm making in line for what I believe God has called me to do, and my purpose and my destiny with God. I counseled a girl who was from England who was dating a guy from America, and he really felt like he was called to work in the forestry program in the woods. And she really felt she was called to the mission field to serve in the foreign field in India. So she feels she's called to work in the mission field in India, and he wants to go work in forestry. They had great connection. They really felt God was it, but the bottom line was they wanted two different things. Amos chapter 3, verse 3, how can two walk together unless they be agreed? So I think that changes your checklist. Your checklist is constantly evolving. And I think what you'll also find is you become more experienced relationally with the opposite sex. The more you meet the opposite sex, the more you date or whatever, your checklist, not only is it going to change, it's going to shrink. You might have had 16 different things when you were 12 years old. You had this long list, this grocery list of what you expect out of a man or out of a woman. But at a certain age, it gets down to 5. It might even get down to 3. I remember before I got married, my list was long. And the older I got, the shorter the list got. I mean, there were some very basic things, because 16 things can't be important to you. That's not reasonable. 10 things can't be important to you. I would even say 5 might be a lot, to be honest with you. You can't make 5 things very, very important. Some of those things are desires, but not necessarily important. But I think, again, that depends a lot about your purpose and walk with God. So, yeah, I'm okay with having a checklist with who to date. You shouldn't waste your time. But I'm going to say this. You shouldn't waste your time when you're dating people. And that having this checklist helps you not to waste your time. But I can promise you, you will waste your time a little bit. No way around that.
Yeah.
You're going to waste your time. If you're not wasting your time, you're just not trying. Because there's no way you're going to get involved in people's lives, and people get involved in your lives, and you can tell right away. I don't care how slow or how fast you are, there's going to be folks that there's no connection. But that's why dating is so important. I would say dating can be as long as 2 years or longer. Don't be so quick at the dating stage. And at the courting stage, that would also be long, because sometimes you're not so sure. Like, I spoke to a couple today, and they were talking about getting married in September, and I said, I want to ask you to pray about something. Would you consider waiting an entire year to make sure? I think fools rush in. I think speed kills. This is next to choosing Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, next to choosing a church. This is the third most important decision of your life. Why in God's name would you be so fast? What are you going to get? What is the reward for being quick? There's no reward in marriage for being quick, by the way. None. No reward at all. You do not demonstrate your love to someone based upon how fast you marry them. What you demonstrate is carelessness. What you demonstrate. Borderline desperation. When I married my wife, I actually got to a place where I didn't need to marry my wife, then I was completely free to marry my wife. But I don't want to ever marry someone because I need to marry that person, because that once it becomes a need, it starts competing with even God. Be careful when you need to get married, because you're going to start rushing and you overlook a lot of things. Then you get into marriage and these things come back at you. Like, oh my God, I didn't know that about him. I didn't recognize that about her. Because you were so busy needing to get married, you never knew the person. Like, it's important to you need God. You don't need a person. A person is a complement to your life. They're not the need of your life. Be careful when you make a person the need of your life. Then that person becomes a God to you. Whatever I need in my life can become a God to me. It can become an idol to me. And woe be unto you when your spouse is your idol, because they have the power to control your life. That's a dangerous place for anybody to have. That would be my thoughts about a checklist. But some basic things with a checklist. Number one, I would say born again. It's crucial, particularly if you're a Christian. I've never recommended Christians to marry a non-Christian. I don't care if everything about their life is right. Christians should not marry non-Christians. 1 Corinthians chapter 5 talks about being unevenly yoked. It will directly impact every aspect of your life. Now, if you're married already and you're not saved, or you're not a Christian, but one of you gets saved, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, you're supposed to stay in the marriage. You don't divorce because your spouse is not saved. But if you're both saved, if you're saved, you should marry a saved person. Okay, so that should be on your checklist. Number two, I'm going to say the character checklist. I would say is integrity. Look for integrity, and there's all kinds of things you can study. I would even say this: when you're thinking about dating someone, I mentioned there were 4 sections of there's dating, there's courting, there's engagement, there's marriage. Even before you get to dating, I would say kind of like study the person if you can. Investigate the person. Study their life. A person can tell you a lot about their life based on the choices that they make, the friends that they have, the way they live their life will talk to you. That will save you a lot of time. It'll also find out little things, but study the person. Don't use dating as the only means of getting to know the person. Study their life before you even approach for a date, because you may find out that what you're looking for, they're not what you're looking for. So that could possibly help too.
A lot to think about. Wow, that's a lot. I really enjoy that answer. I like that distinction that you're making between, having a character being part of the checklist, and also considering the other aspects, such as what are your deal breakers. I think it really just puts a lot for us to consider and to think about there. Now, with that as well, I mean, something that for me has entered my mind a little bit, and I want to hear your thoughts a bit about this. Of course, we've got premarital counseling. We talked about courting now and about dating, and also pre-dating as far as the character checklist and all that is concerned. How important would you say post-marital counseling is? And when I say post-marital counseling, I'm not talking specifically when problems arise, but actually as a way of launching, I would say maybe launching a couple into the marriage. You talked about the exploration of somebody somebody who's experienced, and sort of like taking you through an exploration of what marriage would be and what to expect. What are your thoughts about post-marital counseling in the context that I'm bringing across?
In the 2+ decades of marital counseling that I have done, I have run across a phenomena. I think I have personally married close to 60 people. I've married, which is a lot, but not a lot really. I've had years when I've had 6 weddings in the same year, and I've had years when I've had 1 wedding in 1 year. So it varies. It can be a lot or none. And what I have found is that there is this condition. I'm not even sure if this term is even mine alone, but I call it this: post-marital depression. I find in the first 6 months to 2 years, there is this depression that sets in. And it could be on either spouse. Post-marital depression. Basically, roughly about 6 months in, sometimes it can be as early as 1 month, and it could last until the 2-year mark. And basically, what feeds this post-marital depression for either spouse, I've never seen it really hit both spouses at the same time, but I have seen it hit both spouses. I have seen it hit at least one spouse often. That is, 3 things feed that. First of all, there's a disappointment after the I do. On the other side of I do, number one spouse realizes that the other spouse is not who they thought they were. They've discovered some things about them that have shocked them. They've discovered shocking things like it could be bedroom related, it could be financially related, it could be just personality or character related. But that person on the other side of I do is not who I thought they were. So my expectation has not been fulfilled. That person is not the husband or the wife I thought they were going to be. So that depresses me, discourages me. Secondly, me as a spouse, I thought I would be this kind of a husband. I thought I would be this kind of wife. On the other side of I realized I'm not that person. I thought I'd be the husband who always comes home at 5 o'clock and he's dinner with his wife and spends 2 hours with his kids. But I realized I'm not that guy. And it took me to get over here to realize that. I always thought I would be that guy. But never mind that my spouse is not the person I thought they would be. I am not the person in marriage that I thought I would be. And once again, that discourages me. And then the third thing that feeds this post-marital depression is that the life we have is not the life I thought we would have. I thought we'd have a 7-bedroom house, we'd have money in the bank, but no, it's not. I mean, maybe I thought we'd be living with someone else or living with my mother. I thought we'd have 2 cars, we have 1. I thought we could afford to eat a certain way and live a certain way. We can't. I thought we'd have kids right away. We can't afford it. A lot of the life, usually finance related, a lot of the life that I thought we would have as a married, I had in my mind we'd be married, we'd have this kind of life. I don't have that kind of life. So I'm disappointed with the performance of my spouse. I'm disappointed with the performance of myself. I'm disappointed with the life that we have. And I'm depressed. And I'm discouraged because I have a marriage, but it's not the marriage that I wanted. There are people involved, and they're not the people who I thought we were going to be. So I would say I find that a lot of times I counsel a lot of people that I have married. I remember one year I married four couples, and 3 of the 4 couples wanted a divorce within 6 months. They literally all got slammed hard by post-marital depression. Praise the Lord, none of them got divorced, but I had to do a lot of counseling after I do. Why premarital counseling is very important. But even with premarital counseling, I think post-marital counseling is important because even if nothing is wrong, it helps set the foundation. Remember we said about dating, courting, engagement, and marriage. Marriage, we said, is when you pick up the tools and you start to build. And that first 6 months to that 2-year period, getting counseling is to make sure that you build a good foundation. Right away, if you come and say, no, you two shouldn't have separate bank accounts, you should have one bank account. No, you two shouldn't shame one another when one of you doesn't live. No, you need to have someone come in and say, no, we're not setting the right foundation here. Because I think all the plans that you made, you need to have someone that reinforce those decisions that you made before you got married. An objective voice to do that. So it's very, very helpful. I find that couples that are counseled within 6 months to 2 years after they've been married tend to survive. And those that are not counseled tend to struggle and sometimes collapse.
Wow. Sure. Well, I like that term, post-marital depression. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, and I can actually think back to probably my own experience, and I can see how I went through something like that, even though I could not have put a name on it. And of course, I mean, I myself also having had the privilege to counsel a few other marriages as well. I do realize actually that's what I was dealing with as well, post-marital depression. Okay.
What happens a lot of times too, Pastor, is this. What happens a lot of times too is that you can't put your finger on it, and there's no one to talk to about it. Usually you talk to your family, or you talk to your friends, and you just tell them, hey, I don't understand. You don't know what to do because now you're in the middle of it. So you're stuck. There's no one to talk to. And don't forget, depression is not just a disease, but you can have episodic depression that happens with a trigger. And sadly, the trigger is the disappointment about the marriage not being what you thought it was because you had such high expectations. And depression is really, in one respect, it is your body's defense mechanism because it's shutting down mentally because it can't deal with what's in front of it, which is your marriage. The construct of my marriage is so disappointing based on what I thought it would be versus what it is. I can't handle it. I literally can't handle it, so I shut down. I break down, and then your spouse says what's wrong, but you don't know how to communicate that because you don't understand what's happening. When really, a lot of your depression is a reaction to unrealistic expectations for yourself, for your spouse, and for your living situation.
Wow, so much insight, Pastor Renaldo. That's really such deep insight. I think a lot of our audience are going to find what you shared today very, very helpful. Now, I wanted to move into where we are currently. I mean, I could imagine with this quarantine and the COVID-19 regulations and the lockdown, and I was just wondering that I wonder if there have been any trends that you may have noted with the couples that you are counseling right now, any COVID-19 related marital problems?
Great question. In the area of counseling, whether it's marital counseling, mental health counseling, counseling in general, there is an uptick in counseling needs. One of the reasons is a lot of patients that have medicine they take for anxiety, for different mental health issues, they can't get their prescriptions filled. They can't follow their appointments because of quarantines. But I find in marriages, normally the average husband or the average wife does not spend more than 6 waking hours together a day. They spend more time together asleep in the same house than they do awake in the same house in a given week. But with COVID-19, a lot of folks are spending 12-hour days together, 14-hour days together, and that may sound nice, but if you're not used to spending that much time with your spouse, there's a lot of friction that comes because you're together a lot more than you're not prepared for it. So the time apart helps you process things. The time apart helps you deal with issues. But when you're always together, when there's tension, when there's conflict, you have nowhere to go. So you don't have time to prepare, so that comes out. I've seen over the last 3 to 6 months with COVID-19, I'd say since February, an increase in just poor communication. You would figure that because that we're together more, communication would improve, but it's the wrong kind of communication. So it's more bad communication, more indictment, more arguing, more shouting, more debate. The communication is bad. Secondly, that always leads to an escalation in violence. There's much more violence in marriage right now. A lot of marital spousal abuse is up across the globe. A lot of violence is happening in the homes. Homes that already had the violence are increasing in violence. Homes that didn't have violence actually are introducing violence because you have so much energy, you have so much emotion, you have so much tension and nowhere to go. So I'm angry and instead you can't storm out of the house and go for a walk. You can't go hang out with your buddies. You can't go call your girlfriend. I'm stuck with the person who has my heart and has my passion, and we're both angry, and I have to react. I'm not thinking, so I'm emoting. So we're emoting on each other. We're just wrath at each other. There's an increase in violence. I'd also say there's an increase in the divorce option because you want to escape, and you translate escape as divorce because you're trapped in a house. We're not getting along. Things are not working out. Okay, I'm done. I'm just done. So the divorce rate is increased in the last 6 months in the United States for that reason. A lot of people are registering online for divorces. People are talking about divorces because you can't separate because you can't leave the property. So, okay, we're going to divorce. I just do the last option. Divorces are on the upcrease. I also see there's a lot of resurfacing, old wounds, old hurts, historical experiences, things that have happened in the marriage before. Because of the quarantine, now there's triggers that happen in the marriage. Because we're together in a given day, these triggers I could deal with by separation from you for 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 hours. But when a trigger happens for an old wound, say there was infidelity in the marriage, and then your husband gets a text from a female coworker, that it's the trigger. And you're right there, there's this conflict, and there's all kinds of triggers, but things that can happen. Old unresolved conflicts and hurts that come up, and it produces this fire. And right now, a lot of folks, they have a lot of turmoil and intensity, emotional intensity in their household, and they have nowhere to let it off. They have nowhere to let the steam off. They have nowhere to escape. So yeah, it's actually doing a lot of relational conflict is happening right now. I even see this in friendships. Just a lot of relational conflict is happening right now. So you're right. Right now, COVID-19, because of the quarantine effect, is doing a lot of damage. It's pulling back the rug and exposing some horrible things that have been hidden. Because a lot of couples, and I can be very honest with you, many marital couples are not a couple, they're roommates. And they're like ships in the night. They go out, they work, they hang outside, they have friends outside, they come home, they're only home together and awake for less than 6 hours a day. Less than 6 hours. But with COVID-19, you got 12, you got 14 hours. What do I do with you? I'm sick of looking at you. You're sick of looking at me. You know, so when I'm looking at you and I've got hurt in my heart, I'm going to deal with it. It's causing fireworks in the household.
There's just so much to that. I mean, it's not making me think, okay, on that very same note, I mean, what would you say, I mean, not just with COVID-19, but just with marriage in general, what would you say are, you know, your top 5 marital problems that you find yourself almost constantly, you know, counseling? And as far as those problems are concerned, would you say that COVID-19 has exaggerated maybe some of those problems, or the quarantine situation has exaggerated some of those problems?
I would definitely say, before I give you my top 5, without a shadow of a doubt, because most of us have found ways to tolerate our spouse, sad to say. There's so many issues that we have never dealt with, never got counseling about. We just absorbed it, we tolerated it, and we kept it moving forward, but never dealt with it. So it's still sitting there. And COVID-19 is bringing it to the front of the surface, really. It's uncovering our dirty laundry, really, in the marriage. So, yeah, I would say, without even naming them, I would say, yes, COVID-19 has exacerbated all of the problems that are in all of our relationships, never mind just marriage. But in my experience of marriage counseling, I would say my top 5 marital issues, without any special order, money is always an issue. Not enough money, too much money, the way the money is managed, the way the money is stored, the way the money is saved, the way the money is spent, the way the money is budgeted. Money's huge. Money's huge. That's another conversation in itself. But most couples have they don't have one mind about money before they get married. This is why premarital counseling is so key. Because if you don't have a mind for money before you get married, on the other side of your marriage, you're going to have problems right away. Number 2, second thing I would say, top 5 marital counseling problems that I've experienced: communication. I feel some spouses talk too much. Number 1, it's unprofitable. Number 2, they're not heard. And number 3, they're not discerning. Or they don't talk at all. So they don't talk. I used to think it was all the men didn't do the talking and the women talked too much, the men didn't talk enough. But I've come to learn there's a lot of men that talk too much. I've come to learn there's a lot of women that don't talk enough. I think that myth is changing in the last 25 years. Both spouses can be either one, but the communication is wrong. It's always communication. She never talks to me, or I don't like the way he talks to me. Communication is big, because much of our security as adults is found in communication. Proverbs 22 talks about life and death is in the power of the tongue. 1 Corinthians 14, verse 10, all the voices in my life have influence. So much of our security is connected to communication. And by default, much of our insecurity is caused by communication. So when communication is not good, it produces insecurity in the marriage. Tremendously so. You may say talk is cheap. No, talk is not. Talk might be cheap, but talk is not bankrupt. Talk has a value. Why do you think we make you say your vows? Because talk matters. Why do you like it when your spouse says I love you? Because talk matters. You can cheapen it all you want to. Words matter. Job 6:25. Oh, how forcible are right words. Right words. Anyway, communication. Number 3, I would say top 5 marital problem. I would say unresolved conflict. There's a problem of conflict in the marriage, and you never dealt with it. So if you don't deal with it, you think it's going to go away. It doesn't go away. It begins to build. It begins to build. And that's why when couples often go for counseling, they don't go for counseling for one problem. They have 15, they have 10, because they didn't deal with the one, so they just kept stacking on top of each other like a huge conflict sandwich. And then when the sandwich is too big, it's out of control, now we want help. But then you go to a counselor, we've got 10 things wrong. This marriage is impossible. We can't save this marriage because you waited. Think about conflict like a cancer. You didn't deal with it, but now it's throughout your entire body. So conflict, unresolved conflict. Number 4, I would say relationships with the opposite sex outside of my marriage. Girlfriends, boyfriends, guys you grew up with, girls you grew up with. I would also say family. So it's relationships outside the marriage, whether it's our extended family or our friends or our coworkers. All those relationships affect our marriage, because if any of those relationships get any of our time, our resources, our spouse is going to feel second rate. Like when you get married, all of your relationships change with your friends and your family. In Africa, that's a hard word, because in African, his family is more important than his marriage. And biblically, your marriage is more important than your family, extended. But in African culture, my blood family is more important than my spouse. They rate the blood, they rate natural blood over spiritual union. Why did God say he must leave and cleave, he says. Leave and cleave. That precept is not in African culture concerning marriage. It doesn't exist. So that's why you see families of spouses bullying their spouse, intimidating, and sometimes attacking the spouse of someone, because they don't respect the spouse. And by the way, if you're African and you're married, your family is not going to respect your spouse beyond the measure of respect that they see you give your spouse. You can't expect, if you don't respect your spouse in front of your family, don't expect your family to respect your spouse. It starts with you. You've got to put the guidelines down. You're going to treat my husband this way. You're going to treat my wife this way. But that's a huge issue. Huge issue, especially in Africa. I had one story one time. I had a guy who was married, and his brother showed up. And you know, African culture, your brother is like your wife's second husband. So he starts demanding things of his wife. His brother's telling his wife, go do this, go do this, go do this, demanding everything. And she said, I'm not your husband. I'm not your wife. I'm your brother's wife. So he decided, rather than continue with the marriage, he divorced her and went and got another wife. That's not marriage. That's ridiculous. You can't go get a new spouse because she doesn't get along with your family. That's not how it works. You married her. That's your choice. But anyway, things like that. So that's huge. The number 5, I would say, marital counseling problems, unreasonable expectations. When you say to your spouse, I thought you would make money, and you didn't. I thought we'd have a bigger house, and you don't. I thought we'd have more kids, and we don't. I thought you'd be able to give me kids, and you haven't. Unreasonable expectations. It's a huge, huge marital problem that I counsel a lot. A situation will happen, and I begin to probe and dig, and I find out, okay, you have an expectation for your husband that your husband cannot possibly meet. So you're stuck. You can't make him into the man you want him to be. You have to accept him as the man that your God has given. You can't make her into the wife that you want her to be. You've got to accept her as the wife that God has given. Those are my top 5, I would say, marital problems that I usually counsel. But there's others.
Wow.
A lot of different other ones. But those are the top 5, I would say.
Wow. So that's, unreasonable expectations. Wow. Wow. I don't even know what to say, but there's so much to think about. We're almost coming to the end of our interview, and but there's one more question before we go that I would like to ask you. Now, with all that we have talked about, what would you say, your top 5 tips, or what you can think about right now as far as, marriage is concerned? Bearing in mind also the current challenges now with quarantine, with current COVID-19, because we don't know how long it's going to last for. And as you say, that some of these problems are escalating, so almost as the longer the people are together without having the tools to deal or to handle the challenges right now. So what are your top 5 marriage tips?
I would say, number 1, I'll give you 5. I can think of a lot, but I'll give you 5. Number 1, instead of trying to make your spouse what you want them to be, because you can't do that anyway, decide the kind of partner you want to be and build towards that. Because that's what you can control. I can't control them. I can control me. Decide the kind of partner you want to be. Decide the kind of husband you want to be and build towards that. Decide the kind of wife you want to be and build towards that. Never mind what the other person is. You decide that. You decide that. And who you decide to be, number 1, may be influential in the life of the person that you marry. Number 2, who you decide to be will give you security when the other person doesn't change. It's okay. Or it may motivate a change in the other person, but it kind of secures you in the relationship because you know who you are. Kind of like in 1 Samuel chapter 18, Jonathan decided to be David's friend. He didn't ask David to change. He didn't put expectations on David. He decided the kind of friend he wanted to be, and he became that friend towards David. David didn't reciprocate, but that's okay. But later, David did, and that's okay. But whether David responded or not, he was the same guy. Jonathan was secure because he decided who he wanted to be. So decide the kind of partner you want to be and build towards that. I remember early in my marriage to my wife, the day after we got married, I made a statement to her. I said, we will disagree, but I'll never raise my voice at you. I'll never raise my voice. I may not agree with you, but I can disagree without shouting at, without raising my voice and insulting you. I can do that. I can control me. I don't have to let the situation decide how I am. I can decide who I'm going to be in the situation. And early in our marriage, we had some difficulties in the beginning. And a few times she raised her voice and I didn't raise mine. And she was waiting for me to raise my voice. It never happened. And I can say today, I've never done it in all the years of our marriage. I've never raised my voice because I decided I'm not going to be that kind of husband. So rather than reacting to your spouse, be proactive about who you are as a spouse, and you'll find an interesting reaction in your spouse. But number one, decide the kind of partner you want to be and build towards that. Number two, I would say, learn how to build joy together more and less apart. The problem with we get married is we have found people and we have found places where we find our joy. It might be in sports. It might be in a hobby. It might be at work. It might be with friends. But we've found places and people where we find joy. When we get married, you're going to find out that the places where you found joy as a single person, you will not find joy married. You can't go married to the disco. You can't go married to the bar. Maybe you don't go married to the football match. I don't know. But I just know that it's going to be different because you're married. So you have to find places to build joy together and less apart. Try not to find joy away from your spouse because it will draw you from your spouse. So number 2, build joy together more, less apart. Number 3, and this is important, learn how to forgive. My personal belief, and I teach this in some of the seminars that I've done, the most important word in marriage is forgiveness. Not trust, it's not love, it's forgiveness. Because the end of love is forgiveness. The very, very end of love, the farthest extreme of love is forgiveness. Without forgiveness, love will never survive. Without forgiveness, love will never continue. Without forgiveness, trust has no hope. Without forgiveness, faith cannot stand. So every important relationship of your life, of your entire life that has lasted because of forgiveness. So learn how to forgive and grow and be proactive where you can forgive someone without them acknowledging that they did something wrong. You can forgive without them saying, I'm sorry. You can forgive without them asking you for forgiveness. Watch out when you put criteria on your forgiveness, when you put standards for your forgiveness. Learn how to forgive. Forgiveness is not a gift. It is a skill in the hands of a believer. It is a gift from God to the believer, but it is actually a skill. Learn how to forgive. Forgiveness is not tolerance. Okay? It doesn't deny what happened. But forgiveness is the ability to live beyond it. Forgiveness. I can say a lot about forgiveness, but not for today. Number 4, there's going to be conflict. One thing when I did marital counseling, I never try to stop conflict. I'm not a policeman. Okay, I'm not trying to break up the conflict. I welcome the conflict, but I have no problem with the fight. I have a problem with the way we fight, because when we fight, if there's no boundary line, if there's no rules of engagement, things get out of hand. When you see violence in the home and all kinds of things in the home, things get out of hand. So instead of avoiding the fight, guide the fight. Meaning this, when there's a conflict and you're ready to say something, don't say it. Wait. Go write down what you want to say. I don't care if it's 17 pages long. Write it out. Read it out loud. When you read it out loud, you'll say, this makes no sense at all. Why did I say that? Because you're full of energy. You're full of emotion. When you read it, you're like, I didn't mean that. I meant this. So write it out. Number 2, reduce it. If you cannot thoroughly explain your position in 6 to 8 sentences, you have no position. If you were in a court of law, they're not going to give you that much time to explain your point. Number 2, 21st century listeners do not have capacity to listen beyond 20 minutes. So everything you say after 20 minutes, they're not listening anyway. The problem with many of our communication in marriage is we have too much passion and not enough principle. And all I need is your principle. So cut off the frosting and give me the cake. If you cannot effectively communicate what you want to say in 20 minutes or less, trust me, you've wasted your time and your spouse's time. Reduce it to 6 to 8 sentences. It may take you some time, and I hope it takes you some time, because the longer it takes you to think about how you want to say what you want to say, the less emotion that's going to be connected to it, so that you can come across as rational, reasonable, and make your point, and then move on. Don't lay there. Don't go for the deep penetration. Make your point. We were over at your mother's house the other day. The way you represented me to your mother made me seem inferior. I was hurt by that. Don't do that again. That's it. Then keep it moving. But don't just hang and hammer and hammer. You think that the more you talk, the more they listen. No, the more you talk, the more they shut you off. And then when you actually have something to say, even if it's brief, they don't want to listen. Oh, you're going to talk my ear off. Or you're going to shout, you're going to yell. Nope. When there's conflict, write down what you want to say before you say it. Read it aloud to yourself. And then reduce it to 6 to 8 sentences. And you'll have a higher success rate of conflict management with your mouth. Wow. Number 5. This is interesting. In your desire to be secure, we all want security. Don't build your security on the back of your partner's insecurity. Let me explain that. Let me say it this way. Say, for instance, something's bothering you, okay? But you don't know how to say it. You just know something's not right, okay? So you're trying to practice number 4. You're trying to figure out how am I going to say this, and your spouse can read your face. So your spouse says, what's wrong? And here's what you do. Nothing's wrong, nothing. No, that's the wrong response. You think you're saving your spouse by saying nothing, when actually you're building security by not letting your spouse in, but you're building insecurity in your spouse, because that does not relieve your spouse. That makes your spouse suspicious. Like, what is going on? Why aren't they talking to me? So now you created security on the back of their insecurity. Here's a better answer. I'm trying to process what I want to say. And when I'm able to do that, I'll come back to you. Notice, I'm trying to process it. There's my security. I'll come back to you when I have it. Then your spouse can relax and say, okay, perfect. Number 1, you're protecting me because you're not just going to shout it out at me. But number 2, you've also given me a soft deadline to say, and when I get it together, I'm going to come to you. If I'm your spouse, I don't have to keep coming back to you and saying, what's wrong, what's wrong? How many times have you done that before? When you're talking to your spouse, something's wrong. You go to them and say, not right now. And you go there anyway. They don't say anything but not right now. You walk away, you come back. How about now? No. About now? No. After a while, it becomes this huge thing. So when you give your spouse a soft deadline, you say, I'll come back to you when I get myself together. Here's the thing. 2 things can happen. Number 1, I can come back to you and I know what I want to say. Or number 2, I weigh what I want to say and I say, is this important? And over time, maybe I realize, nah, it's not that important. So I don't come back to you. Either way, I'm secure. So now I'm secure and you're secure. So we can have conflict in an atmosphere of security. But you will never progress with an atmosphere of insecurity. You'll never find security in insecurity. All you do is breed more insecurity. So those are my 5 tips.
Wow. So much from what you've shared today, Pastor Renaldo. Really, really grateful. Really appreciate the time you've taken to talk to our audience, to talk to the many people out there who are considering this very important, decision in their lives. I am almost 100% certain that this would require an encore, but unfortunately we have come to the end of our time. I will. If people have questions, is it okay if I can be able to pass them on to you? If anybody has any questions and any queries or any inquiries about your counseling and how to get a hold of you, is that information you're willing to share with us, with our audience?
Sure. Yeah. My email address is renaldobrown@yahoo.com, and that's RenaldoBrown@yahoo.com. And please address it with your name, and we can discuss some issues. Internet counseling is a bit difficult, but I can maybe perhaps give you some insight. I may not be able to answer your questions. I'll do the best I can, but that's the best way to reach me directly. I check my emails usually every 24 to 48 hours, so I'll get it pretty quick. Or you can connect with me through Pastor Jabulani on social media, and he can also redirect it to me.
And you're currently based in the United States, in Maryland, in Baltimore?
I'm currently based in America, in Baltimore, Maryland, but I travel to Africa quite extensively. I'll be in Africa the next couple of months. So I'm predominantly I'm in Southern Africa, but I can also, at times I'm in West Africa, at times I'm in East Africa. But yeah, I'm basing out of Baltimore, Maryland.
All right, excellent. Pastor Renaldo, thank you once again for your time. I will definitely put up those details for all of you on the screen at the end of our show so that you can know how to get a hold of them. And as he has mentioned, if you do then if you can also send me direct messages on our social media platforms, I can ensure that that message is passed on to you. This has been Mindset Talk with me, your host, Jabu Zwane, where we are changing lives one thought at a time. Thank you for being with us and have a blessed day.